A reading from the Gospel of Mark. When the Pharisees with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees and, in fact, all Jews do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed: the purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So the Pharisees and scribes questioned him, "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands?" He responded, "Well, did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts.' You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition." He summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person. But the things that come out from within are what defile. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile." Jesus is a comedian in today's gospel, but because the translation is censored, perhaps with good reason, the humor disappears. Specifically, the one-liner in question is when Jesus says, "Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile." Obviously, this translation seems to be completely devoid of humor. But when we go to the first century Greek, it helps us understand more accurately what Jesus is saying. In the second half of this one-liner, the Greek word skubala is used and is translated to "the things that come out." However, what exactly is the thing that comes out? Is it negative thoughts or habits that we hear and come out of our mouths? Not at all. The thing does not come out of our mouth, but on the opposite side of our body. What comes out of the other end? You guessed it, the word skubala is talking about literal excrement, but in a much more vulgar manner. In the first century, using the word skubala was considered an obscenity or a swear word, making it more vulgar as a result. So, what would be the more correct translation here? Shit, of course. So, when we read the passage as "nothing that enters a person can defile, but the shit that comes out is what defiles," we see Jesus is using food as a metaphor for something that comes in and comes out as harmful. Knowing that this is a food metaphor, therefore, a better way to understand this phrase is, no food that is consumed can defile a person, but the shit that comes out from a person is what defiles. At this point, if you don't see the humor behind what Jesus is saying, then your family humor is probably not in line with my Surson family, especially the Surson men. Knowing the subjects that often come up at the Surson parties, not to mention at the dinner table, and much to the chagrin of many of my aunts, this saying is hilarious to me, and most likely to all of my male and even some female Surson relatives. It's the type of one-liner that a person would never forget especially if you happen to be one of the people who heard Jesus say it for the first time in the first century. Clearly, these people would have left Jesus with more questions than answers, which is exactly what Jesus is trying to do here. Like John Dominic Crossan says, he is getting people to think, not about literal shit, of course, but more about the kingdom.